Hello viewers, this is the last module of how public spaces could be transformed into fun spaces, and we will be talking about public plazas, gardens, parks, greenery, to spaces like waterfront edges and riverside areas, besides the urban forestry and urban agriculture. So, on this particular slide that I am going to talk about urban street closure. Now, one would think, why would you want to close the streets? Well, essentially street closure is necessary. Street closure, when I mean to say street closure, it's the streets are closed for motor vehicles. So, in this particular slide you see one photograph of Times Square, New York, which was essentially a motorized area, and here this is during Christmas, and where you have a large number of crowd enjoying the spirit of Christmas, shopping around, and of course this particular road is now closed for motor vehicle altogether, because Amanda Burden, the mayor of New York, had closed the street to the motor vehicles so that people could enjoy the streets. There is a link that I can share with you. It's called streetfilms.org. This particular website has movies on how streets could act as public plaza and public place where people could enjoy the streets. In this particular slide, I have shown that they have closed down certain streets to make it play, for where children could play, where pedestrians could enjoy that, create that artificial lawn and enjoy the space, to make it an open market space where people could go and shop, farmer market streets and open streets where people could use non-motorized transport. So, this is being done essentially in India as well, where we have sort of reclaimed the street space for a short duration. This is an example of Rahagiri, which was started in, this movement was started last year sometime in September in a city called Gurgaon, which is a motor vehicle, predominantly motor vehicle city, where a lot of cars and a lot of motor vehicle is used around. And here you would see that people use cycles, they do Zumba, they do yoga, and you have even the space for a stage where people could perform. A similar kind of movements have happened in parts of other cities as well, like Rahe in Pune, and soon they are going to do it in Bombay as well, in Bandra, and they have done it in the past in a city like Chennai, where they closed down the beachfront for only cycles and only pedestrians, which is a great movement. This is a great way of people reclaiming public plazas and public places for the benefit and enjoying the benefit of the public plaza and public spaces. Now, I am going to show you a short video also, and I am going to talk about a movement which led to a complete revolution. This was in 1960s when Jane Jacob, the famous Jane Jacob's book, if you have heard of The Death and Life of Great American Cities, she talks about preserving neighborhood and encouraging mass transit, whereas the American mentality as such of owning a private vehicle and driving across continued to be a space of high momentum, where you had Robert Moses, the mayor of New York back then in the 60s, who wanted to build big highways which could transport the private vehicles across. And these and other differences led to a showdown between them in Greenwich Village and engendered a debate that is still going on today, whether we are building cities for people or building cities for automobiles. So, I have a video. Essentially what Jane Jacobs spoke about was that people, and it's people's perspective that has often been ostracized and never looked into, and planners need to recognize that. So, I am going to talk about water frontage now, and public realm along the waterfront. Everybody loves waterfronts, everybody loves water as an element of landscape, but often forget that access to this waterfront and access to these water bodies is as essential as keeping the water body clean, pristine and beautiful. The slide that I'm going to is going to talks about this is in Lower Manhattan in New York, and what you see around is that there are plenty of space for people to sit and observe the waterfront. This deck also leads down to the water to the river, Hudson River, but does not also creates a safety barrier. And the railings that are used around that is transparent. You could look through them. They don't hit your eye line, and you could enjoy the being around the water body. This is how our Indian context of how we access our river. Yes, the rivers are dirty, polluted, and mixed with effluent and sewerage all over, especially the river Ganga. Now that the Prime Minister of the country intends to clean up our rivers and link them together, we should aspire for a beautiful riverfront in due course of time. So, I have taken out examples from the city Banaras, which is thousands of years old, and the ghats around the Banaras city, and this is examples of Haridwar, in which you could see that people throng to the water body to have a holy dip inside the water body, and you have these small boats taking you across two shores. Yeah, so in India, essentially people pray water bodies. When you pray a water body, why do you dirty it? That's a question that we need to ask. Why don't we preserve it for our future and enjoy the relics of our past? So, another waterfront in New York, the essentials of the design of this particular waterfront that you see are these lamps, which even during the night or early evenings, you could enjoy the public space around it, and the railing is designed in such a manner that it acts as a platform for people to keep their stuff, to if they bring in and want to work from this kind of ambient environment, they could do so. The next, the recent and the most successful riverfront development in our country is the Sabarmati riverfront development. Essentially Sabarmati dried up, and they brought the Narmada water through a canal into the Sabarmati, which is essentially a lake. It's a 21-kilometer long frontage, and it's been barricaded by a concrete wall all across, so that this water or the river could be streamlined. There is a barrage, there is Vasna barrage, which sort of closes and doesn't let the water get out of it. So, essentially Sabarmati riverfront is basically a lake instead of calling it a river, because river flows through. And what you see is that the city of Ahmedabad, there are several bridges built across the river. They wanted to revive the riverfront altogether. So, in these photographs that you see at the below, you have people coming down to the river, enjoying the river, and this is before this particular construction took place, or rather concretizing of this place took place. Now, all cities in Gujarat essentially have had a culture in informal markets or weekly market that exists every week, once in a week. There was a market called Ravivari or Ravivar market in Ahmedabad, which was uprooted because of this riverfront development. It used to happen along the rivers, and that has been accommodated in that informal manner in this particular riverfront development as well. The other example that I am going to talk about is Kankaria Lake. This is all Indian context, and often we say that Western world is so alien, they are able to keep their rivers and waters pristine. And these two examples that I showed about Ahmedabad is progressive examples of how cities are transforming their public spaces, their open public spaces. This river, this is Kankaria Lake, where you have an island in between, and there is a temple, this old temples and the relics of our past coexisting with the present and future of the city. The beautiful plaza created all along the lake helps people to walk across. There is a small stretch where they even have a toy train moving across a portion of the lake where people could sit and enjoy the ride, and children could play and enjoy the ride. Somehow they have not allowed people to walk down to the lake to keep the lake clean and beautiful, and you are prohibited to even throw articles, and there are dustbins, provisions of dustbins across the pathway, so that people could enjoy and maintain this living spaces. Another example that you see is of Marina Beach. Now, there is this photograph essentially shows during the 2005 tsunami that hit the Indian Ocean, the water came up to this front, which is almost about 500-600 meters away. The sea is actually 500-600 meters away, but it's just closed in, and that's a scary feature after all. People throng to Marina Beach, and on Sunday evening you should see that it's just beautiful that so many people enjoy such a big, second longest beach in the world in such a manner. The problems of the beach essentially is cleanliness and lack of public toilets that do not exist as of now, or are inadequate, but the city authorities and the civic authorities, civic society is intending to work towards improving this. Now, I will talk a little more technical stuff on how to design public parks and plazas. Now, when we design a plaza or a park, it needs to be occupied, it needs to be accessed. If public place or a public plaza or a public park needs to be accessed, it has to be visible, and the most visible portion is the central of neighborhood. So, if you build a plaza or a park in the side of a neighborhood, you will have lesser number of people coming in. In this particular slide, what we see is how long narrow parks of 30 to 40 meters in length and 120 to 150 meters in width should be exposed to vehicular movements. Yeah, and in this particular slide we show as to the group open space unrelated to movement path, and doesn't become successful because it doesn't have access to this space. I will talk about why Central Plaza or Central Park is important. Here you see the Central Park, New York, surrounded by buildings, which is why people throng to this particular space. And it's beautiful actually, in this Manhattan, the Central Park in New York completely changes the landscape around the space. It's that big lung which kind of through which the whole build form breathes. This is Regent Park in London, and Lalbag, which is a botanical garden essentially in Bangalore. Now, Lalbag, which has or hosts a flower festival or a flower show every year in January, February, is beautiful to look in because they preserve the entity and the ecosystem around it, and as they don't allow the vehicular movement inside the park, it's still clean, pristine and well maintained. So, I have another video which talks about how public participation could change the way we look at parks are, so when public spaces are successful, they will increase opportunity to participate in communal activity, and this fellowship is open, is in the open, nurtures the growth of public life and is stunted by the social isolation of ghettos and suburbs. As these experiences are repeated, public spaces become vessel to carry positive communal meanings. So, this essentially is a poor neighborhood. That South Africa was marred by apartheid, wherein there was a clear segregation of the whites and the blacks, and even though the blacks lived in isolation, in this communal isolation, they had created public parks there was a project called VPUU, and wherein they created a park through which people had to walk in day in and day out, and how to create it and make it safely. So they created watchtowers, which I'll show you in the video. VPUU is violence prevention through urban upgrading, and this is Khayelitsha. This is a slum sort of area in Cape Town, South Africa, and the design of the park was in such a way that you had clear access in great movement. So this is the park. Look at it, how it's been lit. You understand that there are no street lights otherwise in the society, and when you have to walk through a dark phase, it leads to crime. And these are the watchtowers across both sides of the park, where essentially everybody knows that it's being viewed and watched, and people tend to enjoy it. This is a life size model of the park and the watchtower, and if you see on both corners of the park you have the watchtower. These are the built examples of watchtower. So even when you are making a design of a park, it should not become a derelict space. In our cities we have several derelict space or dead spaces that we call it, which in turn gives chance for antisocial elements to do things. In the next slide I will be talking about a small park called Paley Park in New York, which completely transformed this small block in New York. So people used to come to the small park with their because these were movable chairs and people could sit around, change the chairs the way they wanted it, and you had this tree cover and a lot of green space around, which completely transformed the block in general. Now we'll talk about very quickly, we'll talk about public plazas and the details that needs to be observed during public plazas. These kind of plazas essentially are created to give the built space more hierarchy. If you see, there are no sitting spaces, inadequate greenery, no water body. These are essentially eases the work of the developer, so that he has less maintenance, and even architects love it because it highlights their building more than highlighting people in the spaces. I have another video which talks about this public plaza, and everybody would recognize this design by Anish Kapoor. It's called the Cloud. People throng to this stainless steel sculpture because they see their reflection, and it's just interesting how people look at it. Yeah, and this is right outside the Seagram building, Plaza. This has been later addition. So here you have people enjoying the space altogether, walking in that the sun gleaming onto the water, and nice stormwater drain, so the water doesn't stop and doesn't cluster. We'll speak about this, and this is skyline of New York City in general, and the metro coming in as a transport medium. Thank you. Getting back to where we were, how our public plazas exist. Again, another example from Ahmedabad. Given a lot of examples from Ahmedabad because I am so familiar with the city, not because of anything else. Okay, so this is Manek Chowk. Now it's a small plaza that transforms at different times of the day. During the day it acts as a parking lot or a parking space where the informal street vendors or street vendors with carts move around selling bangles and jewelry, attracting women tourists around that area. And around this plaza, you basically have these jewelry shops or gold jewelry shops or pawn shops. Now what happens is, early in the morning, the sweepers sweep the space, and they are called gold diggers because they basically essentially look for the powder, the gold powder of that area. And during the night, this space transforms into a hustle bustle of people because you have nice eateries and it's open all night, almost till 1:30 you could go around at night and have the local cuisine and delicacies of Gujarat. Another example of a square which would otherwise not attract many people is Tahrir Square, well known for the 2011 people's movement to remove Hosni Mubarak, the then president of Egypt. This space basically is a junction. Tahrir basically means revolt, in Revolt Square this is. New Delhi's India Gate, if you look at it, has this hexagonal structure which is 625 meter into 625 meter, and it basically highlights the New Delhi's India Gate. I told you in the past that the India Gate was a influence or drew influence from Triumph d'Arc that you saw in Paris, the presentation that we showed you in Paris. Now this, all these cities have these monumental scale, and they have these nice long pathways, the Rajpath and the Janpath. So this road leads to the President's Palace, which is Rashtrapati Bhavan. This area also is noted for a movement that happened, when India was to pass an anti-corruption bill, and you had Anna Hazare's. I'll show you another video wherein people have protested line, which was otherwise not accessed. It was in a dire strait altogether, and people brought in, they created a Friends of High Line, and essentially people got together and transformed High Line altogether. So keeping these wild berries and wild shrubs in place and this underutilized space altogether, they transformed the space into a place where people would come, enjoy the view from the height, and they didn't block the noise and the other things around New York. So this is how people use High Line today, enjoy the city's traffic movement in an arena. And they've segregated the landscape with the hardscape completely. Yeah. So I am coming to the last section of my presentation, which is coming together as a beginning, keeping together as a process, and working together is success. This is what Henry Ford talked about, and High Line was all about people saving their heritage and stuff. Talking about urban forestry and agriculture, it said that we must grow some part of our food, because we may go to a doctor or a lawyer or an architect or anybody once in a lifetime, but we eat the fruits and vegetables and food every day, so and at least 3 times a day. So we should grow some part of our food every day. So if you're talking about social justice, it has to encompass the food that we eat, the people that grow the food, how they treat it, their health benefits, their wages. So the movement starting to grow food has to blossom, and it should be into a social justice conscious. The garden suggested there might be a place where we can meet nature halfway. This is Michael Pollan talking about gardening and usage of space. And I'll just quickly run through what is the necessity of trees in urban areas. It's a reservoir of urban biodiversity. It ameliorates urban heat island effect, which otherwise attracts a lot of heat because of the built space. It reduces flooding due to stormwater drain, which essentially goes into the riverways and waterways of our city and stormwater drain, and it creates positive health impact, especially in urban areas, and acts as a lung. This video basically essentially talks about Stuttgart and how people in Stuttgart protested against building a new metro line because they wanted to protect the trees which existed even before the World War II. In fact, during the World War II, people didn't cut those trees and died in the cold. So, this is a strange Stuttgart, and they Germans generally look at future with the high speed line across Europe they building. So, Stuttgart cannot be neglected altogether. It has to go through Stuttgart, and which is why the tracks which are 150 years old, which is still running though, needs to be changed to a more suitable high speed line. And here you have the plan, that is to free up this land. They were essentially planning to cut out all the trees and build real estate, which is essentially going to serve the high income group or people with a lot of income. And this whole protest and the movement completely changed and transformed. Although in a public referendum was passed, and the political party which was winning for 40 years was thrown out of the government because of this, for not being supportive of the people. This is where this is a park which will vanish, which is having trees which are 200 years old, and even during the World War II they didn't, so nobody dared to cut down these trees. Here you are trying to build luxury apartments on these trees, which is a very sad thing, and that's what completely brought people together and changed the way it looks. Yeah, and there was a public protest, and believe it or not, even in a place like Germany, you had water cannon thrown around. I'll go to the last part of my slide, which is legislation for conserving and preserving urban trees and landscape in India. So, there are several municipal acts which the urban areas are to abide by. There are Indian Forest Acts, Land Revenue Codes, bylaws and master plans, and tree preservation acts or special acts which prevent felling of trees in urban areas. These are legal documents that sort of helps us to preserve our urban environment, even urban marshes. We've taken so much from the nature. It's time to give back to the nature and prevent us from felling of these trees. This is the last part which shows about shrinking cities and how landscape will help to get back to that shrinking of the city. What's happened in Detroit is it is a motor city, and a lot of manufacturing shifting to China and India and other countries. Essentially, Detroit which is home to so many people, has actually shrunk in size. And in the outer side, or rather suburban Detroit, you have very few houses. In fact, all of them are supposed to move in. There's dilapidation and derelict spaces where antisocial elements thrive. So, there was a movement by a couple of suburbanites who basically were talking about redoing or restructuring their urban area through landscape and growing own fruits and vegetables in their backyard, creating community gardens for people to grow their basic needs and help the local economy survive. And that's about it. Thank you.